Seems we are live. I'm hoping we are live. Hello, everyone. We are live in the last day of the Kërtëresh Young Adult Festival. We are here with Hafsah Faizal, who is the known author and best-selling author of We Hunt the Flame, and also something that will come on our shelves this autumn, and that is We Save the Stars. We are very happy to have her together with our young adult friends who have enjoyed her book and the translation of this book for some time now. And I think they are exciting to meet her and ask questions and know the answers to the things that have been in our minds as we read the fantasy novel, and also as we go through the magical realm that is been built for us by Hafsah. Welcome, Hafsah. We are so happy to have you here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I think that we have how many now in the live with us? Quite a few people. We're happy to have you. We understand that you are also now going to have a series, a TV series, which happens to be the theme of this young festival, young adult festival. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the books, just in case someone's not familiar with them. I am the author of We Hunt the Flame, which you can see the Romanian edition right here, and We Free the Stars, which I hope the sequel will be out in Romania soon. I know it will. And We Hunt the Flame is a YA fantasy set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, where a girl named Zafir ventures to this villainous island where she has to retrieve a lost artifact that can save her dying world. And at the same time, we have the second protagonist, who is the Prince of Death, sent on a similar mission to find her, kill her, and retrieve the artifact for his father, the autocratic Sultan. But of course, when their paths cross the island, that's not exactly what happens. And they discover an ancient evil brewing that they might have to join forces to defeat. So the book came out May 2019, and I've been holding on to film news since December of 2019, when we sold it to STX Entertainment, and I learned it was going to be a TV series, and I was only able to announce that a couple months ago. I had been like so excited to announce it, but I had to like keep quiet about it for so long. It's still in very, very early stages. They actually ended up renewing their contract because they didn't have much time to do anything during the pandemic. I mean, during the early stages of the pandemic. And so I have been going back and forth. We've been discussing things. We chatted with different writers before we decided on one that everyone was very comfortable with. So I'm waiting for news now.
It's very exciting. I think it's been exciting for everyone ever since we've heard of this, and it's because I think our young adult friends, and not only, well, we've all been enjoying lately the amount of fantasy television that's been offered, and it's quite a bit. And I think that it's raising interest in this type of worlds that have been built on new mythologies and on new characters and on different types of perspectives than we are maybe used to.
Yes.
And we've seen in your We Hunt the Flame quite the world building, and we know that this concept has been maybe newer to our audience, the concept of world building. How do you choose this type of mythology that you've been creating? Because it's complex and it's structured, and it's also quite engaging in the sense that it's complete, let's say. So it doesn't feel fragmented. It doesn't feel like you've stumbled onto a world but you can't really get out of. It actually has like a red thread, like a yellow brick road that you can go through and get to hopefully a very positive end. We will see in September when we actually have the book in hand. And
I think it ends pretty nicely, but you can find out. So when I started writing We Have the Flame, it was actually my very first fantasy. Before that, I had written science fiction, and I actually wasn't very sure about genre at the time. But when I started writing We Have the Flame, it was set in a very Eurocentric world. And I had reached about a third of the story before I realized that it wasn't sitting well with me. Like there was something bothering me about the story. And so I am a designer and I'm a very visual person. And so I set this story aside and I started sketching the world's map. And that's when it hit me that, okay, this map represents the Mediterranean region quite a bit. Why don't I set it a little further south in Arabia? And I knew that when I set it in a place like Arabia, which has been often demonized or exoticized in different stories in the media, I had a task before me and I wanted to create enough touchstones so that people who are from the region will feel like, oh, it's like coming home. And for people who aren't familiar with the region to be like, this is a lot like our own lives. There's nothing different here. It's just the terrain, just the culture. It's not, these aren't monsters. People just like us who call this place home. And world building is just one of my favorite things. And I usually attribute it to being a designer, where I open up a graphic, I open up a clean draft and I have to put together a graphic and I want to convey something in that one image. And that's what I want to do when I'm writing too, where I want to convey as much as I can in this one sentence or one scene. And I usually paint it in a way that maybe, let's say it's a square. I'll give you 3 or 4 points and I'll help you visualize the rest. You've got to draw the square, but I'll tell you as much as I can about it. That's one of my favorite things when it comes to building a story, where I try to craft as much of it as possible, but also give the readers some work to do so that it's like a collaborative process almost. But We and the Flame and Aralia just started building and building. And once I finished the second book, I was like, this world is too big to say goodbye to. So I've left the door open so I can maybe enter the story and world again. But in my new series, the first one is called The Tempest of Tea. This one is actually set in a fantasy England sort of setting, and it's actually a universe expanded from We and the Flame. So you know about Aralia even in this new story. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that sounds like the next questions I was having for you about the Tempest of Tea, because we've together with the news about the TV series, there came the news that Macmillan was having this collaboration with you and starting this new series, Tempest of Tea. So that is actually quite great, because I think at some point you said that perhaps you would not be continuing with the novel writing or continuing to go into the fantasy world. Are you tempted by any other genre, do you think?
Yeah, I when I first started writing, like We and the Flame is my 5th manuscript. When I first started writing, I was writing science fiction. So I kind of think I'm burnt out of that. And I don't know if I'll ever return to science fiction anytime soon. I would like to write a contemporary. And the other day I was thinking of a new romance idea. And I was like, where did this come from? I've like so fully immersed myself in writing fantasy that once I finished Beyond the Flame, it just made perfect sense to dive into another fantasy world. But one day I would like to write contemporary and maybe even that romance idea. And even a spin-off from We Hunt the Flame. We'll see. There's just so many different things I'd like to do. Not enough time.
Yeah, that is great. That's great to hear, because we like it when our favorite authors are expanding into new horizons, new genres, and give us a bit more of worlds and that perspective of a different type of world. And it's exciting to hear. Looking for questions from our young adult fans, but they seem to be a bit shy. All right.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, drop it in the chat.
Yes, please. Okay, until they decide that they have a question, I guess I have another. Ah, okay. Andrea, are you happy for me to read it? Okay.
I can read it out loud if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, what was your hardest scene to write? I have a hard time with a lot of scenes unless I've already thought it up beforehand, which is usually like the bigger emotional beats in the story. I usually have those thought about way before I start writing, but the scenes that go before that, sometimes I will struggle because I think there's something I've started realizing that I sometimes my first instinct is to find the quickest way to write this scene, the quickest way for a character to get to the end of it, for them to solve this problem. And then I started realizing that that's not what a story needs. A story needs the most complicated way to get to the end of that problem, to find the solution. And it took me a while to realize that. And I'm not sure why. I guess in real life, I'm constantly looking at problems and trying to figure out the quickest way to solve them. And so I want my characters to do the same, but it's the more elaborate it is, the more rewarding the end result is. And so I've started like rethinking scenes, like how could I make this more difficult for my characters to get out of? And that makes for a more challenging, but also exciting and fun process. So usually the harder scenes are mostly the transitional scenes. I enjoy writing emotional and introspective scenes where the character is like thinking about their backstory or thinking of their relationship with another character. Those are the most fun for me.
Brilliant, thank you. Raluca, if you want to ask the question.
Yes, hi, I'm so excited to talk to you. And I have one question for you. And you said that you wrote some books before We Hunt the Flame that were unpublished. What was your first one about?
Hello, it's so nice to see you. So my first story was actually my first story was the reason why I started writing. I was reading a ton of books. Before that, I wasn't much of a reader. And so I read tons and tons, and then I woke up one day with this like really crazy dream, and I thought to myself, like, why don't I make a book out of this? It was actually about three sisters, and they were living in this weird complex, and this is during like the dystopian YA days in like 2010 2011, I think. And I thought, like, they're stuck in this place, how are they going to get out? And there are these like weird creatures, and I remember so little of it, but I remember thinking that this was the best book ever. And so I was trying to get it published, but of course it didn't work out. And I'm very glad it didn't work out because I was not ready for it. After that, I wrote something very Tarzan related, and then another dystopia. And the one before We Hunt the Flame was actually a space opera, which I kind of like more than my other novels. And I actually self-published it. But yeah, I'm just glad We Hunt the Flame was my first because I'm not very proud of the others.
Thanks so much for answering.
Of course, thank you for coming.
Thank you. We have Daria who wants to know what comes first, the plot or the characters.
Definitely the characters for me. I used to be a very plot-based author before We Hunt the Flame because I didn't know what was going to happen in the story. I just knew that there were these characters, and I would be exercising with my sisters and then telling them that, oh, this is what Zafir is going to be like, this is what Nasir is going to be like. And I told them about these characters, and that they were shaping up in my head, and I didn't know what story they were going to tell. But usually with my writing, I have a hard time plotting beforehand and outlining something because then I feel kind of boxed in. So with We Hunt the Flame, I just knew that there was this girl hunting in a forest for people who didn't really care about her. And that was how the story started. Why is she doing this? And then I wanted someone who was kind of her opposite, which became Nasir. And so the story slowly shaped as I wrote it, but even after I sold rights to it to Macmillan, I ended up having to change so much of the plot because it wasn't fully formed. But with my new book, A Tempest of Tea, the only way to be a very efficient author is to have a plot beforehand. And so I did need to plot the story out, but at the same time, I first thought of the characters and they kind of simmered in my head before I moved on to the plot.
Thank you. Bianca wants to know in which character you find yourself the most.
Oh, currently, well, definitely Zafir and also Nasir. I feel like I used to joke that Zafir was me before getting published and Nasir was me after I got published because I was suddenly very anxious. But as I'm writing my new book, A Tempest of Tea, I had my friend read it the other day and she was like, I was telling her, I'm afraid people are gonna call my character very much like Kaz Brecker from Six of Crows, because this is a heist fantasy and she's the one running the heist. And so she was like, I wasn't thinking of Kaz when I was reading it. I was thinking of you because you're very much a businesswoman who is very tired of everything. And so that was just surprising to me that I did not think I would find myself in this new character, because Zafira was very much me, where she was thinking of her family, trying to do everything she could for them. And I didn't realize that my new character, Arthi, is very much like me too. So I think no matter what, there's always going to be a piece of me in all the characters that I write.
Thank you. I think that ties in with the next question from Elinka, which wants to know what inspired you to write a book about old Arabia, or this fantasy lands that resembles Arabia.
Definitely the reason why I said in the beginning, where I was setting this in a Eurocentric world before I realized that this story could be set anywhere that I'd like. And why not set it in a place that felt familiar to me, that felt like it was often construed in other stories. I was also aware that there were a lot of stories that were taking like a genie in a lamp or a magical carpet and all these Arabian myths and recycling these stories. And I thought, you know, if Lord of the Rings can be an entire fantasy novel in this place that of the author's own choosing, why can't an entirely new fantasy adventure be set in a place like Arabia? And that was some of the things going through my head while I was writing it.
Great. The next question from Bianca is, what are your favorite fantasy books? I think is what kind of fantasy do you consume?
Well, one of my favorites is obviously the Six of Crows duology and Shadow and Bone.
The Grishaverse.
Yes, the Grishaverse. I very much love Uprooted by Naomi Novik. It actually inspired a bit of We Hunt the Flame, where it has this like evil forest that's kind of creeping forward to swallow a kingdom whole. I also love the Grave Mercy series. It's really fun. It's about assassin nuns, so it's pretty dark. And I love The Cruel Prince. That is a very dark story, but I do love it. I have only read the first one, unfortunately. I haven't had time to read the second two, the last two actually, but I very much love that one. I have a really hard time answering questions like, what are your favorite books? And I suddenly don't remember if I've read anything in my life. I think I'll go with those three for now.
Well, there's quite the selection there, and I think most of them we have. I'm hoping that they are also on our shelves in our libraries. Yasmin wants to go straight for the heart, and she's asking, when you told your friends and family you wanted to write a book, who supported you the most?
I started writing when I was 17, so I'm 28 now, so it's been quite some time. I do know that my parents were both supportive. My dad was like, try to, when I start something, my dad doesn't let me just let it go, so he was kind of pushing me to finish it. My mom was more wary. She was like, are you sure you want to do this? It's a lot of work. But now as I write, my family is very supportive. My sisters are the reason that I have sanity to write, because they are like continuously answering my questions and making sure like I am doing this correctly and I'm doing this in a way that is working. Like they read every instance of my stories, and they're always there to like answer my questions. I feel so bad sometimes. I'm just like, why, what if I did this, what if I did this, and they're just always there to like help me hash it through. So definitely my sisters.
It's good to have supporters in real life for sure. I mean, you can have so many fans and everything, but if your closest there for you, it just makes the world.
Yeah.
Andrada wants to know, have you thought about the characters or storylines you might want to explore in possible prequel or spin-off set in the world of Arabia?
So once you read We Free the Stars, you will probably notice that I have left quite a few threads open and hanging, and I have seeded in a few new threads that I would like to pick up in a spin-off, but I won't spoil anything in case you haven't read the sequel yet. I would like to write a prequel from the witch's point of view, but I don't know, maybe as a novella. But I think for any of that to happen, We Hunt the Flame needs a little bit more of a fan base. So we'll see if that happens once A Tempest of Tea comes out, because that is set in the same universe. And so if I could expand my fan base, I could always go back and write another. But there's just so much room to explore in Arabiya. It's just such a vast world. And I feel like 2 books was just not enough to explore it all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Andrada. Adelina?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to say that I'm very happy to meet you again here, and we can see each other because you managed to write a book that is now my second home, if I have to be honest, and I'm fangirling on it like constantly. But I was actually wondering, do you like reading poetry? Because, for example, We Hunt the Flame starts with a kind of a poem, and I absolutely love it. I have it as my phone wallpaper, if that doesn't show enough. So I was actually wondering if you read poetry and if you like it, and if you have some recommendations for us.
So when I was asked this question before, I would always answer with no, I don't like poetry. But now I find myself, do you know Instagram poetry, where they have like these like really cute and sometimes really moving little Instagram ones, and I love those. But I don't follow anyone in particular. I mostly, if I suddenly find myself needing inspiration, I'll just get on Pinterest, look at one quote and then click on it and just keep scrolling through more, just so I could like refresh my memory and get some words going. And I think the world in We Hunt the Flame really lends to that poetic quality, where it's like it's Arabia and we're thing to them. And so it made sense. So like with The Tempest of Tea, I'm more like stepping away from that poeticness, but I don't think it's happening. I think I'm still getting those same lyrical lines going, but I don't really read any specific poet's work. I do know that old poetry was like really tough for me, where it's like you're supposed to find some meaning between the words, and I was just like too tired to do that.
Yes.
It's so nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adelina. Beatrice, very sorry. I should have seen you earlier. Please.
It's okay. It's okay. Hello, I am so
Hello.
happy to be here for the first time. I see you here, and I'm so happy. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions. First one would be if you would associate one song with the action of your book, We Hunt the Flame, what that song would be, and who are your favorite authors?
Oh, I don't really listen to music much, but when I do need inspiration, when I was writing We Hunt the Flame, I used to watch the Assassin's Creed trailers. The title for We Hunt the Flame actually came from the soundtrack in the Assassin's Creed Origins trailer. If you watch the trailer, you'll probably understand where I got the title from. It's not the same, the words aren't in there, but it's inspired by it. As for my favorite authors, after getting published, I suddenly have this like appreciation for all the authors because it's so hard to write a book. But some of my favorites are Holly Black, who has been super kind to me since I started publishing. And another one would be Leigh Bardugo, of course. I also love V. Schwab because when I was 17 and writing my first book, she was gearing up to publish her first book. And I sent her an email and asked, how much money does it cost to get published? And which was, you don't need any money to get published. You need to find an agent. And so she was the one who was like, you don't need money. This is what you need to do. And she kind of led me to those first steps. So I will always be a fan of hers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've just named a few of the fan favorites in Romania in terms of fantasy and with a lot of cult following.
Yeah.
Elena wants to know, which character did you enjoy writing the most?
Oh, if we're talking about We Hunt the Flame, I love them all equally. I miss them all equally. Zafira will always hold a special place in my heart. But at the same time, so will Nasir, because he had the most rewarding arc in the story where he goes from this terrible person to someone who is open to his compassion, who is actually a great person deep down inside, but he just needed some help getting to that person. But the stories would not be complete without Altair, and so I can't pick a favorite. It's not possible. Of course, if I asked the characters, Altair would be like, I am the favorite because he's everyone's favorite. But I love them all equally. And Lana surprised me in the second book, where I thought she would just be this gentle sister, but instead she's just a murderous ball of rage.
Brilliant. Bianca has a question for probably your future romance writer self. Will Zafir and Nasir end up together?
The answer to that is in the sequel. So once you read We Free the Stars, you will know what happens. I will say that I cried at the end, but probably not for the reason that you're expecting. No spoilers.
No spoilers, please. Yes. Alessia?
Yes. Firstly, I'm so happy to be here and I'm happy to meet you. And I have a question. I'm sorry, I forgot it. Oh yeah. How did you discover your love for writing and, plotting?
Well, hello, thanks for coming. I'm excited to be here. So like I said, I was just reading profusely, reading tons of books. And once I had that really weird dream, I was like, why don't I try to write a book? I've read so much. It seems like it's an easy thing to do. It wasn't easy, but it just opened up this new world to me that I have so many story ideas and I can write them in any way that I'd like. Once I wrote We Hunt the Flame and started setting it in an Arabian setting, I realized that I had an opportunity and I had this way of showing so many other girls that you can keep your identity. You don't have to change who you are in order to succeed. You can be who you are and do as much as you'd like. And so that kind of became a challenge to me, that I need to try and get published the way that I dress, the way that I am. And once I had that challenge and that goal set, it was basically just me trying to meet it. But as for my love for writing is hard, and I continuously think of giving up. When I was writing We Free the Stars, it was really, really hard. I did not realize how it was to write a sequel. Authors had always said writing your sequel is very difficult once you're published, but I didn't realize the city of that. And so when I was writing We Pray the Stars, I was like, maybe it's time to give up, because I could not think of any new story ideas. I could barely think of the words for it. But once I finished and gave myself some time to like relax and get out of that burnout, it all came back to me. And it's like, once you start writing, I don't think you can ever stop.
What is an advice for people who just started writing? You have, I sometimes want to publish a book, and I like your advice.
My advice would be to write, to just write, to ignore market trends, to stop thinking too much about how the story will end, how the middle should go. When I was writing We Hunt the Flame, I only knew how Zafir was stepping out of that forest. I didn't know anything else that was going to happen in the story. I didn't know who the villain was. I didn't know how the plot would be. I just started writing and let my characters take me through the story. And sometimes you won't even have a plot once you get to the end, but you will go and figure it out through revisions. Writing is revision, so don't stress too much. Just get to the end, and then everything else will fall into place.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Alicia. It seems that the questions are coming in hard. Bianca wants to know how you come up with a plot twist. Actually, I think everyone wants to know how you come up with a plot twist.
Well, sometimes the plot twists have to be thought of beforehand, but with like We Hunt the Flame, several of them, I was sort of subconsciously feeding the foreshadowing and little tidbits in, and once I got to the end, I was like, oh, I could do this, and all the pieces are already in place. I just have to make it a twist. So I guess my brain was like sort of wired to that already. I'm more conscious of it now that I'm plotting a story. So while I'm writing my new one, I have like already thought of the twists, and so I need to like figure out how to feed it in. But what my friend was saying the other day was, you need to establish something at the beginning that you revert at the end, sort of like how the Titanic is an unsinkable ship. It was lauded and promoted and spoken about as being an unsinkable ship, and then it sank. No one expected it to sink because everyone was talking about how unsinkable it is. So it was a twist, but also it was spoken about right at the start. So it's like you should have seen it coming, not even the people in real life. So that's sort of how you have this thing that you establish at the beginning that you revert in the end. As to how to come up with them, I don't know. Read a lot of books, I guess. Read a lot of different thrillers and different stories. And it doesn't have to be in the genre that you're trying to write. Just read different ones, because almost every story has some sort of a twist. And then make a list of those twists that you like and see if you can bend it to your own story.
It's quite the advice. Thank you. Karina wants to know if it was harder for you to write the beginning or the end of the book.
I always like writing the beginnings because there's just so much opportunity. It's harder because you don't know where to start, but oftentimes I just end up starting somewhere, and that ends up being the catalyst for the story. So I like writing the beginnings because there's just so much freedom, whereas in the end you kind of have to tie everything together. With We Free the Stars, I did like the ending. As much as it pained me to say goodbye, I had been thinking of several scenes for so long that it made me cry to write them, but I was looking forward to it, so I enjoyed it.
At the end of a journey, it's everything together. Daria wants to ask you if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would that be?
Well, when I wrote my first book, I was pretty sure that it would work out. Once I wrote my second one, I was like, maybe I just need to work a little harder. When I wrote my fourth one and it didn't get published, I thought maybe I've been reading all of these success stories from different authors. Maybe it's just not for me. Maybe I'm meant to be in the publishing world, but not as an author. And so I thought I'll give it one last try and then I'll give up for good. And that was We Hunt the Flame, and it did work out. But even then, once I signed my contract, I was like, I author of color. I'm a very, very minority author, and no one's going to buy my book. My publisher's not going to promote it. And even once it hit the New York Times bestselling list, and I went on tour and I met authors and I met other readers in signing lines, they would line up to get their book signed. I still thought, I have these fans, but my book isn't big enough. I haven't sold enough. It's not going to get another book deal. But I'm always constantly doubting myself, constantly putting myself down. And so one of my biggest pieces of advice to myself or to anyone is to stop second guessing yourself and to always believe that you are more capable than you think you are. I think if I had a bit more self-confidence, I would have been a lot happier.
For who doesn't know, you have made it to Forbes's 30 under 30 list for art and style section. So I think your advice is the right thing to do. The thing that gets you where you need to be in this journey.
Yes.
Ali, I think, is a great supporter of you, a great fan, and she wants to ask you a question.
Hello, Hafsah.
Hello.
I might be a bit shy because this is the first time that I. Sorry.
That's okay. You're okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm very pleased to meet you, and I did a little bit of research before being here today and well, I've heard that you're this lovely person that is very open to talking to her readers. And I must say that that is very much true. I was here behind the camera being all like, oh my God, she's adorable because of the interactions here. And well, because of this meeting today, I started reading We Hunt the Flame too, and so far it's very good. I'm very much enjoying it. So let me get to my questions. First off, this won't be related to your books, but about you as a fictional character. If you were to be a character in, let's say, a young adult book or fantasy book, which one would you be? Like the main character, side character, the anti-hero, villain? You say it. You tell it.
First off, it's so nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. I'm glad you're enjoying We Hunt the Flame. And I'm glad I have turned out to be what you thought I was. So a character in a novel. In my family, if someone's doing something and they're not doing it right, I end up pushing them aside so I could do it myself. So let's say the main character is failing terribly, and I was the side character, just meant to watch it happen. I would end up setting that character aside so that I could take care of things because they're just being incompetent. So I guess I would be the side character who sort of steals the show and takes matters into her own hands and solves it. I don't know which character that would be though, but it depends on the story. Like if I was in Arawiya, I would probably end up being Zafira. I started writing that book when I was 19, so I was like, Nasir was sort of my in-book crush. But if I was in another novel, it would depend on the novel itself. I doubt I'd be the villain. I'm too sympathetic.
Yeah, I get you. No worries. Well, given that you said that you would be a side character, do you have any fictional characters in any types of media that you very much relate to?
Well, this is a tough question. I guess I would relate to Leia in An Ember in the Ashes. In The Cruel Prince, I think I would relate to Jude because I can definitely see where she's coming from, knife and all. I'll just leave it at those two because I'm blanking. I always blank on stories.
Don't worry, it's okay. I feel that. So thank you for your answers. And I really like the choices that you made. And keep it up. You're awesome.
Thank you. So are you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alexandra, she's been wanting to ask a question for some time. Alexandra?
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. It's nice meeting you. I read your book 2 years ago. After at least a week, it came in our country, and I felt like I discovered a new world of possibilities. It felt great. I fell in love with this kind of fantasy, and that's thanks to you. I love the protagonist. It made me decide to be more brave and outspoken. And if I'm going to talk about the male protagonist, we will be here all night. So I want to ask you how it felt to write the scene when Zafira is brave enough to show herself as a woman in front of the people that she was afraid of, but also helping them for all their years.
Yeah. Well, this scene has sort of a personal meaning to me because when I was writing that scene, I think I had just turned 20 or I was about to turn 20. And I had still not put up a photograph of myself online wearing the veil. And when I started writing, when I started blogging, I wanted to put up a photograph of myself, but my parents were like, maybe you shouldn't be careful. And so I didn't. And so I started blogging and I started getting more readers and I was like sort of building a platform and getting people. And eventually this book expo of America, they wanted me to come and speak about design. And so they asked me for a photograph of myself. And I sort of started panicking because no one knew what I looked like. I was perfectly okay with the way I was dressed, but I was afraid of how these people would judge me because of what they thought I was. So they didn't know anything about me, but they would judge me. And that's sort of how Zafira felt when she is perfectly okay being a woman, but her people aren't okay with it. And so removing her cloak and showing herself to be this person that I am the one who's been doing all this time, and you have been judging me a certain way, judging people like me a certain way, judging women a certain way. That was a parallel to what I was going through at the time. And so I guess I hadn't realized it until many years later when I was like trying to think about why I wrote Zafira to be that way. And so I guess it was sort of my outlet when I was going through that same thing that Zafira was, where I ended up looking to my stories for therapy. So I think that's basically how it happened.
Thanks. And I have another question. I was wondering if you plan to write in the future dark fantasy or really dark fantasy, because I loved when you write about that horrible creatures in the desert. It was such a great experience, and I want to read more of that from you.
Well, A Tempest of Tea is actually a heist with vampires in it, and so it's a lot darker than We Had the Flame is, a lot. It is YA though. I do want to venture into adult one day, maybe. And so that would be maybe years from now, but I would want to write that. But for now, A Tempest of Tea is darker than We Had the Flame. And I'm excited for you to read that. I think you might enjoy it if you enjoyed like the darker aspects of We Had the Flame.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You are great.
Thank you. You are too.
Thank you, Alexandra. Anemona has a question. In the process of writing Zafira, were you influenced by the whole feminist movement? Because I see Zafira as a huge personality, a strong woman, and I'm wondering if you wanted her to be so, or her personality built as you wrote.
I think her personality built as I wrote. I wasn't I'm not super into like activism. I wasn't. I think I am now, but I wasn't at the time when I was writing her. I think I was just definitely pulling from my own experiences and seeing the treatment and the differences between women and men in America itself. Not that I was like trying to pull parallels from Arabia, it was just America and how there are always these differences despite us all being equals. So she built as I went. I pulled from myself and the way I was treated in certain spaces, because in my own household, we have 3 girls and a boy. And people are always surprised when they learn that my dad takes preference over his daughters, over his son. And so like when I go out into spaces, and that's kind of the opposite, where they regard the boy as something great and the girls as just there, it would always bother me. And I think that sort of made its way into my stories.
Thank you. Rafaela wants to know which character was the hardest to write.
I wouldn't say that a particular character is hard to write. I think it's certain scenes that are hard to write where I don't know how they should act or how should interact. In We Have the Flame, all of my characters were there for a reason. They were all beloved to me. And so working through their feelings and their emotions and making them 3-dimensional was always rewarding and exciting. In A Tempest of Tea, I'm having a harder time because there are a few more characters to juggle with. And the thing is, Arthi, who is the mastermind behind like a business, and she's the one who is running the heist and all of that, she's a lot smarter than I am, so I'm having a bit of a hard time figuring her out.
Fair enough. Claudia?
Hi, it's so nice meeting you. I'd like to know, have you ever gotten the writer's block?
Writer's block. Hello, it's nice to meet you too. My first thing to do when I have writer's block is to curl up into a ball and cry. Afterwards, I will sit down and try to figure out why I've hit this block. It's often because, well, there's one of 3 reasons. One, I could be burnt out and I need some time to like take a break, read some more stories, just take some time to like let my brain recover. Or 2, my creative well has run dry. So like my imagination is basically burnt out and I need to like watch a movie or read a book, or just, it doesn't have to be in the genre that I'm writing. It just needs to be stories and words. Or 3, the scene that I'm writing just isn't working out. It's not that I don't want to write it. It's just there's something probably wrong there and I need to go back and like maybe either scrap the scene or reassess it and start afresh. It's often one of those 3 reasons. If it's not, then maybe I'm just being lazy.
And I have another question. What was the first book that made you cry?
Oh, the first book?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember the first book, but one of the ones that I do remember was, I don't really read much contemporary, but I did read I'll Meet You There by Heather Demetrios. It's a contemporary and it's about a girl before she goes to college. And she has all of these responsibilities burdened on her and she needs to figure out what she's going to do. She wants to go to college, but she has to take care of all these people. And so there's just this one point where she sits in a car and she's like, I'm tired. And I just started crying when I read that because I related to that moment so much. I was also, I think 17 or 18 when I read it, and it all hit me at once. But yeah, that's all. I haven't read the book since, but it's always been one of the tearjerker novels for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. After Claudia was Bianca, and I think she wanted to ask this personally.
Yes, hello. I'm so happy to meet you.
Hello.
My question is also related to writing, and I wanted to know if you usually write in chronological order, or if you do like to write different scenes and then put them together.
It's so nice to meet you. I definitely write chronologically. Sometimes I will think of scenes that like happen in the middle or at the end, and I don't think of the whole scene. I will just be like randomly in the shower or something, and I'll think of what the dialogue should be, like what the conversation will be. And then I'll just pop out of the shower and quickly write it down in whatever form I can remember before I forget them. And so those become sort of like cookie rewards for me, where it's like I'm going to reward myself with a cookie. And so I write to get to that point. I can never jump and write different scenes out of order. I need to write in order, or my head will be like bothering me, that it's like weighing down, like, oh, I haven't written that. And so I will just write down a little short snippet, and so I'll work towards that. It's sort of motivation, and it helps me write through the scenes that I'm not so excited about, but it definitely means I write chronologically.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you. I do know that a lot of authors write out of order, so it's not like one is better than the other. It's whatever works for you works.
Thank you. Amalia?
Yes. Hi, nice to meet you. And
Hello,
I have
nice to meet you.
another question related to writing. I personally like writing, but I often feel like my characters aren't realistic enough. Some tips that could help me with their development.
Well, are you a plotter, or do you want to write first, like a pantser?
Personally, I think I'm a pantser.
Okay.
I can't hold on a plot.
Yeah,
written.
I have a hard time with an outline too. So one of the things that I've discovered is Save the Cat, which is, they have a novel edition of that. It's for screenwriters, but they have a novel edition for writing. And so in that, I discovered that there are 3 things that your character, one of them is a motivation. One of them is a theme that they're going to learn at the end of the book. And the third thing is their motivation needs to flip. Like on the surface, she wants to earn money, right? But deep down, she actually wants to have something that is hers, or something better than that. That's just a really vague example. But basically figuring out what your character needs, not what your character wants, but what they actually need, is going to help you flesh out your character itself. Because what she wants is going to shape her, and what she's going to change her. So starting at the beginning, and if you have it's a 2-dimensional character at the beginning, that's fine. As you write, you can flesh her out, or you can get to the end of the story and then come back and be like, what is it that's bothering me? What is it that's not working? And oftentimes I do find that your main character will get fleshed out using the secondary characters. That's what happens in We Hunt the Flame. If Zafir was on her own, she would be a lot less exciting. But because she has Nasir to bounce off of, and Altair and Kifa and Benjamin, she becomes more fleshed out. We are shaped by the people around us, right, in real life. And so that same thing happens in stories too. I hope that helps.
Thank you. It helps a lot.
Thank you. Radu?
Yeah, sorry. Hi.
Hello.
I'm ashamed to say that I haven't read your book up until recently. I had it since probably it was released in Romania, but for some reason I just haven't gotten to it, and it's a shame on my part because I absolutely loved it. But I've stumbled upon some of your videos on TikTok, like and where you spoke about the publishing industry and your journey with being a debut author. And I just thought to myself, wow, I just need to read what this person has written. And I just fell completely in love with We Hunt the Flame. And I just wanted to thank you for speaking on matters that some authors tend to don't discuss on their social medias. And thank you for sharing with us this journey.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of it. I'm glad you picked up the book.
Now he's gonna have a few hard months to wait until the translation comes. But I'm sure the journey is going to be very worth it.
Yes, I do hope you enjoy We Free the Stars.
Madalina.
Yeah, hi, it's so nice meeting you. I have two questions. One, the first one is, when writing a series, how do you tend to keep things fresh for both you and the readers? And my second question is, how much do you usually research before writing a fantasy novel and also sci-fi?
So keeping it fresh for your readers. At the end of the day, every novel is very similar to every other novel. And so I firmly believe that the characters are the ones who make the story. And like, if you look, she is your YA heroine, where she is in a place where women aren't taken care of, or where the society is against her. And so she's rising up against that. And that's sort of like Katniss in the Hunger Games and a lot of other YA. But it's her relationship with the other characters in the story. It's her relationship with the world and how she interacts with that, and her personality and how it changes throughout the novel. That's what really makes the story. Because if you look at it, We Hunt the Flame is a quest to get magic, which really boils down to a lot of other novels. And so keeping it fresh comes from your characters and how they react and how they change, and making it all rewarding from start to finish is what really makes the story. What was your second question?
It was, how much do you usually research before writing a science fiction or fantasy novel?
Yes, I don't like research because I mean, I don't mind the reading, but it's more like I will spend 3 hours researching something that will make its way into like 2 lines of the story. And so it feels like such a waste of time. It's not, but it feels like that, because it's like I could be writing words, but instead I'm researching how to write something that'll take like 2 lines. So I don't really do much research beforehand. I will mostly find myself in an area in the story where I'm like, I what this is called or how this works. And so I will like go down a rabbit hole of research on how to like, what are parts of the gun, what are different parts of a gun, or how does a clock tower work? Those are the things that I find myself reading with The Tempest of Tea. With We Hunt the Flame, it was more like I knew what a certain aspect was like architecturally, but I didn't know what it was called. And so I would have to like describe it into Google, like what are those hanging balcony things or whatever. And then I'd have to like find out through Wikipedia or different images. It was a chore because I didn't know what some stuff was called.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good question, Adelina. Adelina wants to know if you've ever gotten to a point where you were so invested in the world that you were building that you couldn't enjoy reality anymore. That's a complicated.
Oh, that is an interesting question. So I actually juggle a business and writing, and so I don't have the luxury of like immersing myself so deeply. But I think I'm really enjoying it if I do incorporate pieces of reality into my stories. I have heard where an author will say that you don't have to incorporate the problems in our real world into these fantasy novels, because you shouldn't. Fantasy is where you can reshape reality. But I find that I end up tackling real world issues in my fantasy novels, because erasing it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but tackling it in my story means that I am like working through and like showing a way that we could solve these problems, that these are actual problems that shouldn't be overlooked. And so I think when I'm really enjoying it, I end up in reality. So I don't think I can ever forget it. I'm too realistic for that.
Oh, yes. We still have about 10 minutes left. I hope I'm not wrong. And I don't see any more questions, but I do have one of my own. You mentioned earlier and in some other interviews that you felt like the fantasy world and the world building character development was really Eurocentric when you started writing. Do you still feel the same now? Or do you feel like the genre has developed more into a community where BIPOC representation is a little more expanded, a little more offering?
Yeah, so when I started writing We Hunt the Flame, it was I was 19, so it was a while ago, but most of the novels were not diverse. There was no diverse movement at the time, and so I felt like I had to set it in this Eurocentric world. But when I had the idea of changing it and moving it to Arabia, there wasn't much out there except the ones that were already written by white people. And so I thought, if I'm going to get published, I might as well try to do it with something different. Otherwise, maybe I don't deserve it. And since then, there have been a slew of new stuff. It's either YA set in Africa or West Africa or different parts of India. And we're having these new perspectives and new stories that are coming from authors of color. And I think that's very important. And not just so that these authors have voices, but also so that readers from different cultures and backgrounds can learn about these new places. Not so that they find these search or like guides to a different culture or tradition, but just so that there's like this open-mindedness that comes from reading about other places.
Yeah, and also transfers nowadays into TV series, and it gets more expanded, and more writers are picking up the trend, which is I think it's very good to have this diversity and coming through to other places of the world. We have another question from Andrei Sara.
Yeah, so when I saw that Cărturești is hosting this festival, I was like, oh my God, I wanted to see you. But then I realized that I don't have the book, you know. It was just unavailable everywhere. I searched my whole town. And I'm really sorry. I feel ashamed right now. But
don't feel bad.
But I really wanted to ask you, since I'm in a reading slump right now, and I don't know why, but I wanted to ask you, how would you describe your books? I don't know, to stimulate me, because I feel like you're really sweet and I like how you describe your books.
So We Hunt the Flame is a YA fantasy set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, right? So there's a girl named Zafir who hunts as a boy. He masquerades as a boy when she hunts for her people in this forest that no one else has returned from. And so she's chosen to go on a quest to this villainous island where she has to retrieve and find this lost artifact that can save her world, which is dying. There's like and that deadly forest is actually growing and swallowing up her kingdom. And so she knows that she has 1 year left before her kingdom is swallowed whole. And so she decides that she's the only one who can save her people. And so she goes on this quest. So it's sort of like a chosen one, but it's that she has all of the gusto to go and do it herself. She knows that no one else is going to do it. So I might as well. I owe my world that much. And so she goes to this villainous island. And so at the same time, we have the prince of the kingdom, who is an assassin. He's known as the Prince of Death. He's actually, he's a really compassionate person by nature, but his dad has been telling him to destroy that compassion, to be a monster, not to fight all these people that he wants him to fight. And so he tells him to go to the island, find Zafira and kill her, and bring me back that artifact. And so Nasir goes to the island, and he goes with the king's general, who is this goofy, funny guy. So you have this grump and goof relationship going, and I love that, because it's like the super stoic and grumpy guy, but there's this goof next to him who's always like needling him and getting through to him. So that bromance is one of my favorites. And then when Zafir and Nasir meet, they have this blooming enemies to lovers romance, which is also my favorite. And then once their paths cross, they actually discover that there's something worse happening and that they might have to join forces to get through it. So it's enemies to lovers, grump and goof bromance, a bunch of twists at the end, and also found family, which is also one of my favorite tropes. So there's a lot of tropes that I love. And in the sequel, you get betrayal, loses an eye. Once you read We Hunt the Flame and you love this character, it will be hard. And also the one bed trope, which is also one of my favorites.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna order it now. I don't care where I find it, but I'm gonna order it.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes, and I think we were going to give Rafaela a chance to ask a question, then see how much time we have for Bianca and Alexander.
Yes, thank you. I waited all week for this meeting, and I'm so excited to be here. My question is, how long it takes you to write a book?
We Hunt the Flame took me 4 years to write. So it was a long time, mostly because I told myself it was the last time I was going to try to get published. And so that was when my business started taking up. And so I spent more time with my business than writing. Free to start 8 months. It should have taken me less time because I was on deadline, but I needed to keep extending it. And then A Tempest of Tea, the new book that I'm writing, I've been writing it for 5 months, I think. And so I need to start writing a bit faster to meet these deadlines. Ideally, it should take me 2 months to draft, but I'm very slow at writing, mostly because I can't write and move on. I have to always go back and keep editing and fixing the story up, which I don't recommend, but it's something that I just have to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The organizers are telling me that we are at the end of our meeting. I know there have been more questions, but I'm sure we can reach Hafsah in other ways. We're looking forward to the TV series, the translation in September of We Save the Stars, and also for the all the new exciting things that she is preparing for us. Thank you very much, Hafsah, for being here with us so early in the morning for you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who came and asked all of your questions. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. We are looking forward to seeing everything that you will be bringing to us.
Thank you. Can't wait for you guys to read We Free the Stars.
Thank you. Thank you very much.